In this tutorial, we're going to look at lists. Now, I'll be using a site called Replit. If you ever want to poke around this website, feel free to do so. It is free for right now. I feel like eventually they're going to charge for it, but there is a free option right now. So basically, it's just going to allow me to type my Python code and run it over here. I do recommend that you do follow along in idle and you type this code in idle. The book kind of scatters all this context, like all these methods and things that we're going to learn in this tutorial is scattered throughout the chapter. So this would give you like a good documentation, like a good project to go back and look at for reference. So if you do follow along, make sure that you include the comments, and that way you'll kind of know what's going on with the code. Okay, so a list in Python is similar to an array in JavaScript. It's just a collection of data. We include that in square brackets. So here, you guys know how I love Stranger Things. So we're doing a stranger list project. Here, I've just created a list, an empty list called st. And if we print that right now, it's not going to print anything. I mean, it's just printing the square brackets. There's nothing in it. But we can easily add items into that list. So in this case, I have st equals our square brackets, and then I put in the first 4 characters, like the core group of Stranger Things. And then if we run this program to print st, you'll notice that we do have Mike, Dustin, Will, and Lucas as strings. Now, with lists, you wouldn't necessarily have to just do strings. So we could include numbers, we could include floats. All of that is completely legal in Python. But for this purposes of this project, I'm just looking at strings, okay? So strings would need to include quotation marks, just like when you're assigning them to a variable, and then ints and floats would just be the number without quotation marks. Now, just like when we were looking at strings in the last chapter, lists are indexed and reversed indexed. So in this case, I have print st, or list st, at index location 1. And we remember that indexes start at 0. So this would be, Mike would be 0, Dustin would be 1. So this code should print Dustin. And then this code says print -1. So we know from what we learned last chapter that this is removed now. I took this off. So Lucas will be -1, Will would be -2, -3, -4. So when I execute this code, now we have Dustin, which was indeed at location 1, and Lucas, which was at -1. Now we can use slicing to print multiple items in our array. So in this case, we've used the square brackets and gave a value of 1:3. So that's going to start printing at index location 1 and stop before it gets to 3. The 3 is not inclusive. So we would have 1 and 2. So this code should print Dustin and Will. If we run this, we do indeed see Dustin and Will. We can also use our len method to print how many items are in the list. So if I run this code, it should print 4, which it does because there are 4 characters in our list. Now, unlike strings, lists are mutable. That means we can change items in our list. We could not, with strings, take a string and assign a single character a new value, but in lists we can. So this code is going to, at index location 2, which is Will, remove Will and replace it with 11. So now when we print this list, we have Mike, Dustin, 11, and Lucas. It went to index location 2 and replaced what was there with what we asked it to replace with, which was 11. Okay, now we can use the list as a function and change a string into a list. So in this case, I have a new variable called show, and we're using the list method and I'm passing in Stranger Things. So when we print this, it's going to take each item in that string and store it in its own item. So it's its own index location, including the space. So the space between R and T is also its own item. There's some other methods we can use using dot notation. So if we wanted to add an element to the end of the list, we can use dot append. So I take my list using dot notation, dot append, and then a value. In this case, we're going to add Hopper to the end of our list. So now we have Mike, Dustin, 11, Lucas, and Hopper. And when we print the length, our length has changed to 5. We've increased the size of our list by 1. We can also use the insert method. The insert method has 2 arguments, the index and the element that you want to add. I'm about to sneeze, but I'm not going to stop recording. Okay, so we can use dot notation, dot insert. We say at what index do we want to insert, and then we say what do we want to insert. So at index location 4, so the append would only add to the end. Now we get to pick where we want to add it. And if we print this, now it has increased to 6. So we now have 6 elements in our list. Okay, we can also extend a list. So let's look at this. I've created a new list containing Max and Erica. They were characters that were kind of more prevalent in the 3rd season. Spoiler alert. So I did st extend, and extend, the value that I'm passing in is the other list. So now when I print st, Max and Erica are at the end, okay? So it's going to add a list to the list, all right? Now, we can add, let's see, this one I have commented out because eventually I'm going to change it back to comment out. If we use the insert method as opposed to extend. So using extend added the values of this list into our original list. But if we use insert as we did up here and say insert at 0, this new list, look at what it does. It inserts a list into a list. Okay, so there are actual reasons that you would want to do that in programming, but just note that if you just want the values of another list to be added to your original list, use extend. If you want to insert a list into a list, use the insert method. Okay, so I'm going to comment these out just so that we'll have our code. It won't be so cluttered over here. Okay, so now let's look at pop. Pop removes and returns in an element. So here I've created a variable called n. I set it equal to Stranger Things.pop, which is going to remove the last element. Let's run that and look. So our original list, after I've commented out the Max and Erica, contained Hopper. Okay. So I did pop, and then I said print what pop is, the value in. So it said, hey, that's Hopper. And now if I print my new list, Hopper has been removed. Okay. You can also pop at a specific location. So using an index location of -2, I said, let's take something out. I think I meant to, hold on. Well, we'll just go with it. I meant to comment that out in my tutorial, but just go with it. So if I did remove at negative index 2, so this was the list before that, -1, -2, -2 is Lucas. So when I print that value, it was Lucas, and my new list no longer has Lucas in my list. I meant to remove Steve, but whatever, it happened. Okay, now let's say I want to find a value in my list. So maybe my list is many characters long. Maybe it's got 100 values in it, and I don't have time to search for all those values. Maybe I just want to know, hey, what index location is X something. So we can use the index method and pass in what we're looking for. So watch when I run this code. Okay, so I'm saying I created a variable called inValue and said find Steve. And then I said print that. Well, it says Steve as an index location 3. 0, 1, 2, 3. That's true. Steve is at 3. Now I said pop. Sorry. I said remove whatever that value is, which was 3, and then print that new list. So the new list does not contain Steve. Steve has been removed. Now, while we're here, let's also look at split. So here I've created a variable called Stranger Things Season 1. Notice it has spaces between it. And if I just created show list, I did show, which is this variable, dot split, and it returns a list of everything once it reaches a space. So like it returned stranger, but then it saw a space, so it said that's one element. And then it returned things, and it saw a space, so that's one element. And then it returned season, and it saw a space, so season is one element. Okay, does that make sense? So it returns a list of items based off of a string. Wherever there's a space, it's a new item. Okay, last thing, sort and reverse. So if we want to sort a list, we can use dot sort. And that will sort in alphabetical order, Dustin, 11, and Mike. And then if we do reverse, that prints in reverse alphabetical order. So we would have Mike, 11, Dustin. And that would work for numbers as well. Like if we had a series of numbers, it would print them in ascending order. So like it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we did reverse, it would be like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I know that was a lot to take in. Play with this. I do encourage you, like I said, to type this and maybe even experiment if you want to add different characters and kind of try to predict what's happening. I encourage you